Somewhere, 65 million years in the past, a starship captain makes a choice. He doesn't stop a war crime. He doesn't fire a single shot to prevent it. And because of that one decision, dinosaurs go extinct, Mars becomes a lifeless rock, and the asteroid belt in our solar system exists exactly the way astronomers see it today. That's not a theory. That's not fan speculation. That is, as of this premiere, official Star Trek canon. Captain Christopher Pike didn't just visit the past this time. He became the reason our present looks the way it does. And by the end of this episode, you start to realize that everything we thought we understood about the history of our solar system was actually engineered by the crew of the USS Enterprise the entire time. So today, we're pulling apart exactly what happened in this premiere, why Pike's choice matters so much more than it first appears, what it means for a fan-favorite character who may be quietly turning into something dangerous, and why this new season, for all its ambition, is already showing signs of a much bigger problem underneath the surface. Stick around, because some of what we found by the end of this breakdown genuinely changes how you'll watch the rest of the season. Let's start with the mission that broke history. The Enterprise gets thrown 65 million years into Earth's past, and almost immediately the crew realizes they've landed in the middle of something nobody expected, an actual Martian civilization, locked in an interstellar war with an insectoid species called the Dol'drm. Commander Cassell, leading the Martian forces, steals an antimatter core straight off the Enterprise and starts building a weapon capable of wiping out the Dol'drm homeworld entirely. And that's where Pike is handed the kind of decision Star Trek has built its entire identity around. Does he stop a genocide? Or does he let history play out, even if it means an entire species disappears? Here's the twist that makes this so much more complicated than a simple moral dilemma. Pike eventually realizes the Dol'drm homeworld doesn't exist in the future he comes from. There's no fifth planet between Mars and Jupiter in the 23rd century. There's only the asteroid belt, which means whether he interferes or not, that planet is already gone in the timeline he knows. So Pike makes the call not to stop Cassell. Think about what that actually means for him as a person. Pike isn't a soldier following orders here. He's a man staring at the birth of a tragedy he can't prevent, forced to accept that some outcomes are locked in place before he even understands why. That's a brutal kind of powerlessness for a character who has spent years defined by his willingness to sacrifice himself to save others. And the fallout is staggering. When the Dol'drm world is destroyed, the shockwave doesn't just end the war. It knocks Mars out of its orbit, turning it into the dead planet we know today. The debris from that shattered world becomes the asteroid belt sitting between Mars and Jupiter right now in our own solar system. Every rock out there, according to this episode, used to be a living world. But it doesn't stop there, and this is the part that recontextualizes everything. One chunk of that destroyed planet doesn't stay in orbit. It falls to Earth. It becomes the Chicxulub impactor, the very meteor responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs and clearing the path for mammals, and eventually humanity, to become the dominant species on the planet. Let that sink in for a second. The USS Enterprise isn't just present for the extinction of the dinosaurs. According to this new canon, the Enterprise is the reason it happened at all. Without that mission, without Pike's choice, without that antimatter core being stolen in the first place, there's no asteroid impact, no mass extinction, possibly no humans standing here to build a Starfleet in the first place. So here's a question worth sitting with. If the Enterprise is responsible for its own crew's ability to exist, is this really free will Pike is exercising? Or is he just fulfilling a loop that was always going to happen anyway? It's a predestination paradox, and Star Trek has flirted with this idea before, but rarely with stakes this enormous. And it doesn't end when the Enterprise escapes. Spock, ever the one to find the elegant solution, realizes they can't outrun the blast wave conventionally, so he uses its raw energy to slingshot the ship forward back to the 23rd century. Clever, efficient, very Spock. But it also means the crew leaves that timeline behind without ever fully reckoning with what they set in motion. There's one more wrinkle buried in this storyline that fans might have missed. Dr. M'Benga examines Cassell's DNA and the genetic material of the Martians more broadly, and finds traces of their genetic code scattered across other species throughout the galaxy. The implication is enormous. Some of the Martians didn't die when their world became uninhabitable. They got out, they spread. Which means Mars might be, in some roundabout way, an ancestral origin point for life we recognize elsewhere in the Star Trek universe. That's not confirmed as fact within the show yet, more of a scientific hypothesis M'Benga raises in the moment. But it's exactly the kind of thread this franchise loves to pick back up later. Now, while Pike is grappling with cosmic-scale consequences up in orbit, something much smaller, much more personal, and arguably more unsettling is happening down on prehistoric Earth. Number 1, Lan and Ortegas land in the Cretaceous period and immediately run into two things nobody expects to find together: dinosaurs and a crashed Dol'drm spacecraft. That crash means the away team isn't just witnessing Earth's past. They're now the second confirmed instance of an alien presence on Earth in this era of Star Trek history, right behind the Dol'drm themselves. It's a quiet but genuinely significant rewrite of the timeline, because it now predates other ancient alien visitors referenced elsewhere in Star Trek lore. But the moment that really deserves your attention is much smaller and far more personal. During the mission, the team gets ambushed by what appears to be a velociraptor. Leon, reacting on instinct, punches it. Not stuns it, not shoots it, punches it hard enough that the fight ends immediately. Back on the ship, she learns she broke her hand doing it. She didn't feel a thing. If you've been watching this show for a while, that single detail should hit you differently than it might a casual viewer. Lahan has spent years trying to bury who she really is, the descendant of Khan Noonien Singh, one of history's most dangerous genetically engineered tyrants. Last season, when her Vulcan-Romulan transformation temporarily unlocked those dormant traits, we saw exactly what she's capable of when that side of her takes over. She plotted to conquer the galaxy. She stopped being Leia at all. So when Dr. M'Benga jokes about her going off to conquer the galaxy now, and she answers with genuine fear instead of laughing it off, that's not a throwaway gag. That's a character quietly telling us her enhanced traits might not be temporary anymore. She even claims she's always had this strength, which honestly doesn't line up with years of previous fights where she's been overpowered. That inconsistency might be the show's way of hinting that something in her biology has permanently shifted. Here's the question worth asking as this season unfolds. Is Leia becoming more like her ancestor because trauma keeps pushing her toward it? Or because her body is simply catching up to genetics she was always going to inherit eventually? The show doesn't answer that yet. It just leaves the question hanging over every scene she's in from here forward. Elsewhere on the ship, life goes on in smaller, more grounded ways. Number 1 finally gets promoted to full commander, a moment that's been decades in the making if you count her nearly 10 years, holding the same rank since her debut back in the franchise's very first pilot episode. It's a small, satisfying beat, even if we already know her ultimate future doesn't put her in the captain's chair of this particular ship. There's new friction brewing too, an engineer and a pilot who genuinely can't stand each other's work habits, and a mentorship between Uhura and a new Vulcan cadet that goes nowhere near as smoothly as Uhura hoped. All of which brings us to the bigger picture forming around this entire season, and it's a strange one. Because for every genuinely bold, ambitious idea this show throws at you, week after week jumping between horror, noir, time travel, pure spectacle, there's a nagging sense that the emotional weight of these events isn't sticking the way it should. Pike just made a decision that will haunt most people for the rest of their lives, and by the time the credits roll, the show has already mostly moved past it. Compare that to something like the Next Generation's most beloved episodes, where a single experience permanently reshaped a character for every season that followed. Strange New Worlds has the ideas. It has the performances. What it seems hesitant to do is let those moments actually change the people living through them, and that tension is what makes this premiere so fascinating to unpack. It's simultaneously one of the most consequential hours of Star Trek storytelling in years, and a perfect example of a show that might be more interested in inventing its next spectacular idea than sitting with the last one. So here's the discussion worth having. If the Enterprise is genuinely responsible for the extinction event that allowed humanity to exist, does that make Pike's choice heroic, tragic, or something else entirely? Drop your take in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of paradox Star Trek was built to make you argue about.